Where did you like to play as a child? I ask this question a lot because childhood memories shape us into the people we become. Welcome to Play It Forward, a Wearthy podcast. I'm your host, Lukas Ritson. Thanks so much for joining me. I talk a lot about play. I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm an educator, and I'm a playground designer. So I wanted to gather some of my favourite people who are advocates of children and nature and create a space to have an honest conversation about getting more kids outside. The power of play is very often underestimated, and I think we all need a little more play in our lives.
Our next guest is an award-winning speaker, best-selling parenting author, and has been labelled the teenage expert by the media for her compassionate and grounded advice for parents, tweens, and teens. Today, we're talking about the challenges our youth are facing, the role parents play in childhood, and how to support and encourage young people to thrive. Just on that intro alone, you see why this person is going to be an amazing guest for us today. A big, warm, worthy welcome to Michelle Mitchell. Thanks for coming and joining us via Zoom today.
I am so excited to be here. We share a similar passion with prevention, don't we?
Yes.
So this is going to be a great chat. I can't wait for it.
Yeah, it was like, oh, wait, we've got to press record. Let's get started. So let's get the formalities out of the way. The question we ask all of our guests, where it all started and where did you play as a child?
Where did I play as a child? That's what you want to know. Let me
Yes.
think about that. I think I used to go to my school after hours, and there was something about a school after hours that was super cool, and it was almost a little bit haunting. Like, it was a bit scary just in case the groundsman came around the corner and busted you. But I didn't live too far from my school, so I would often go there after hours and play on the player equipment and wander around and check out the high school area when I was a primary school kid. So that was my stomping ground.
And siblings, children in the neighborhood factor?
Yeah, my sister and I, so just two of us. And we didn't have a huge amount of kids in our neighborhood, but we had elderly. And I had kind of circuit that I would do, whereas I would visit, Auntie May on Monday and, Mrs. Rose on Tuesday. And I absolutely loved it. It really birthed a lot of compassion in me as well. And I would take them flowers that I had picked from other people's gardens as I walked down there. But that was all part of it. And they would have chocolates and Scotch finger biscuits waiting for me. So that appreciation
Motivated.
for who I was and my, ability to contribute started really young for me.
Yeah, and you can see how that transcends into your work. What was that moment when you're like from that to now and what you do? How's that contributed?
Yeah, huge, I think. Was always a big part of my world. But I remember even being 12 and 13 and writing my first book and hiding it under my bed in fear that someone would find it and, hold me accountable to publish it or something like that. So I would hide it. But in my heart, I always knew that I would be doing what I did now. And I felt like teaching would be a really short stint for me. I was a classroom teacher for 4 years. And then I founded a charity. And for me, I love seeing kids thrive. That whole area of well-being really excited me. I wasn't as passionate about maths and English as some of my colleagues, and I could really tell the difference. I was like, one of these things is not like the other one. I don't care whether there's an E on the end of that word quite the same way as you do.
Yeah.
And so I just at 24 just took this leap into building a charity, and I worked one-on-one with girls. I ran small group programs in schools for kids at risk of sort of dropping out of education, did a lot of work with child safety all the way through to working with families of quite, professional families whose girls have kind of got themselves into trouble along the way. And I ended up with 12 staff and a psychology clinic, and it was just such a beautiful season of my life.
And you skimmed into it there, and something like delving into a lot more of your content and looking at these fixes, if you will, of the experiences children are having now and going, okay, what is the prevention of these things? And then it made me even consider a deeper question, is that have we got childhood wrong completely? From schooling and how we're teaching, how we're interacting, how we're putting such an emphasis on after school activities and succeeding, and how did we end up getting childhood so wrong for the well-being of children right now?
Yeah, I feel like we're always preparing kids, and I know we spoke about this off air, didn't we? But
Mm,
you know, in upper primary, we're preparing them to be teenagers, and in high school, we're preparing them for the real world. And I don't think we're ever really enjoying the stage that they're in right now in that moment. And play is a huge thing that's been lost in this process of jam packing our kids' schedules with things that we think is going to benefit them and things that we feel obligated to provide so much of, in fear that they're going to be left behind. But there's something about helping kids dig into their unique blueprint. I'm really passionate about this at the moment, that, you know, each child is stamped with such uniqueness. And our job as parents, I think, is to help fine tune their ears to that inner voice that's going to be that
yeah,
compass for them as they go through life.
yeah. And that refuge of mastery. Go, yeah, this friendship's not working, but at least I have this thing that I'm good at, or this thing that I enjoy. And if we're creating no margin for that discovery because we're constantly in the doing train and allowing no being train, like, where's the refuge for the child? That's where they're going to end up having those external actions for their internal well-being. That's obviously, I'm not an expert in the field, and it's just my very humble observations. Am I in the right track, or I'm not seeing something there?
Your humble observations are articulated brilliantly. If there's any message that I've got for this generation of girls, it's that success starts from the inside out. It's not about smashing ceilings and seeing you roar. It's about digging into who you are and listening to your gut and following your own path in life and being really true to that voice. Because I feel like if young people can master that internal world, the expression of that is going to be healthy and true and helpful for people around them as well.
And if we flash forward and put it more of in a prevention than like like I mentioned earlier, the giving them the vitamins for physical health instead of putting a band-aid on the injury. Where do we start with our young girls and young people to have that identity and strength in a world that seems like you've got a big system here and a very little, somewhat resilient yet delicate
Yeah.
person? How does that work?
Okay, so much I could say there. Let me get focused.
That's
Okay.
good.
I was just like, oh, my mind was shooting off in so many directions right then. Um, this generation of kids has very much been labeled having a life skills deficit.
Mm.
And so Mark McCrindle has done a whole lot of research around this alpha generation coming through and what our kids actually need. And it's got some amazing insights in there. One of them is that there's 2.2 billion of them, and they're the most marketed to generation that has ever existed. They're a consumer market in their own right. And I feel like our kids are navigating such a information rich, advertised rich world, and to be able to listen to their own voice in amongst all that is huge. Even the amount of education that our kids get these days, and the exposure and the diversity they get exposed to, for them to be able to be still enough to listen to that inner voice is really massive. Research is very, very clear that connection is the base of everything. And in fact, young people learn a resilience much more through their relationship with us and their relationship with other people than any other way. So we can promote risk taking and we can, you know, expose them to challenges. But the overarching influence is actually our ability to connect with them and model what resilience looks like when we go through the tough times. With all this talk about resilience, I get really worried that we're putting such an unrealistic expectation on kids, that we're expecting them to, you know, have their shoes on, their bags packed and their lunch ready when they're going through a really crappy time at school. And if we remember back to our own lives, we had the cover or the doona over our head refusing to go.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that's actually what resilience looks like. It looks like them digging into the depths of where they are right now and then finding the courage for the next best step forward. And so, it's not just a progressive path like this that
Yeah.
just is all rosy. And it's actually completely normal for our kids to have times where they genuinely struggle. That's where they learn this stuff.
Yeah. And something that stands out there, it's kind of like, I want you to know your feelings and be emotionally aware, but just make sure it's the convenient ones. Convenient
Yeah.
emotions, please.
Yeah. And resilience has got so much to do with us being able to master that fight flight kind of response. And that takes time. And our kids' prefrontal cortex is definitely not developed until what we know in their early, late 20s. And so I feel like our expectation sometimes for them to be able to, move through challenges and bounce back is just a little bit preemptive of where they're going to be at in the long haul.
Yeah. Are we just kicking the can down the road as well? Like,
I think so.
we're saying like, no, be resilient, get on with it. Be resilient, get on with it. But then it's within those teen years, from childhood, from that early child, like all the way through. And it's finally around those teenage years where we're seeing the spillover.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I can't.
Yeah.
I can't do that. I see that within play and from a physical development standpoint and emotional regulation and courageous type of play. It's kind of like, no, don't do that. Don't do that. I'm going to direct you in everything you do. And then it becomes teenagers and it's like, we'll make informed decisions now.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
How?
Yeah, and they haven't had that foundation because we're
Yeah.
really building the foundation for the teenage years, in kindy. That's
Yeah.
where it all starts. And this platform of trust that they have with us is almost this basis of so much in their world because their attachment with us. I think our girls are particularly just over the amount of messages they get about who they should be. And I think they feel flooded with it.
Mm.
And it comes out in all sorts of ways with our girls. But I think as they're trying to navigate who they need to be in life, one of the big things is the amount of technology influence and the external influence that's in our homes these days. And parents are just struggling to navigate that, I think.
Yeah. And what are you seeing as the impact of that?
Yeah, I think girls comparing themselves to you know, not even, in our era, it was Elle Macpherson. She was the body, and we had pictures of Elle Macpherson on our walls and we had her in our diary, but she was a real life person, Lucas.
Yeah.
Now our girls are comparing themselves to just avatars. They're not even real life people. And that's just such an unrealistic benchmark for anyone. They're not even admiring something about someone who's a real breathing human being with a personality and a soul that they can follow
Yeah.
their life story.
Yeah. And that ties into what we consider as well-being
Yeah.
as well. And what's that look like? Because we've got our representation as an adult, what well-being looks like. And if you ask a parent, I want them to be confident, independent, honest. But then the actual message when you ask a child, what does your parent want you to be? Smart, successful.
Yeah.
So what is that definition?
It's often about those external factors of how well they're getting along with their peers, or how they're going academically, or whether they're doing their best effort at school. But the reality is this is such a personal expression, and I always look for like those expressions of health, which I think primarily need to be expressed in that sense of joy as they engage with the world. And if the joy of life is just sucked out of them because they're on technology 24/7 comparing themselves to someone who's not even real, or their world is so jam-packed with expectations they can't find their own soul, I think we're missing the mark with kids.
Yeah. And my observation is like with the impact of screen time, it's kind of like they're losing the capability to have self-fulfillment, because if you've got this instant gratification by a screen and by technology, you're not developing that strength and the flex in your muscle to be able to go, hey, I'm the master of making myself happy.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
then take the screen away. What have I got?
And so joy and also that sense of autonomy and ownership over what's going on in life, they're two things I really look for. I was in a grade 6 classroom last week and we were talking about self-care and the ability when friendship dramas are really heightened, the ability to ask yourself, what do I need right now and how can I look after myself, instead of looking to everyone else to do that. At the end of a hard day, being able to say to ourselves, okay, what do I need right now? And we really talked about all the strategies available to them, but so many kids are just telling me they're going straight to technology as a way to regulate their emotions. And that does concern me, because there's some things that are great for our brains all the time, and there's some things that are not great for our brains all the time. And these kids were recognizing that although it gave them a temporary relief, it wasn't fixing, solving, or really helping them look after their whole being. So kids are very aware that it's an easy go-to, but it's not necessarily giving them the results they need.
Yeah, I like that word you just used there. It's the whole being, not just well-being, because well-being could be considered like universal. It's like, okay, what's the universal look like? Okay, you're doing these things, tick, tick, tick. But whole being, kind of like that internal out instead of outward in. Is that the
Absolutely.
intention of that word?
Yeah. And even our definition around resilience, right? I'm just looking
Mm.
at some research here, actually from, let me just, the longitudinal study of Australian children. But the following statements were statements they asked young people to say yes, yes or no to. Am I able to adapt to change? Can I deal with whatever comes? Can I see the humorous side of things? Am I coping with stress in a way that strengthens me? And these are all excellent skills that we want our kids to have. But I don't want it to be just another tick box that our kids have to get through. Like, I
Yeah.
have to show resilience, and I know how to get 10 out of 10 at that exam, but I actually am not feeling fulfilled and happy as a whole person inside.
Mm. So how do we support children to strengthen the muscle, or even from a play therapy standpoint, it's like turning on the switch?
Yeah,
Like,
definitely.
how do you do that?
Yeah. I think it's got to come down to, I guess, one thing ourselves is just creating enough routines and rituals in our schedule that our kids have time to breathe, number one,
Mm.
and time to tap into what's going on with them, but also time to make some of those real life decisions that give them the ability to express what's going on in here. I think one of the most powerful things we can do with our kids is give them, like, decision making Friday, where it's their job to make the decisions for the house all day. Like, they determine, the schedule, the food, who, when, where, what, and give them some ownership over life. And I feel like if we can connect what's going on with kids' hearts and give them an expression of that in the real world somehow, instead of imposing it all on them, it's going to be so much better for their development, even if it's slower. That's the
Mm.
thing. We all want our kids to get ahead, but sometimes it's slow and steady that actually wins the race.
Yeah, and it's incremental steps of accomplishment.
Oh,
It's like,
yes.
yes, you can. My daughter is 7. She boiled the kettle and made herself a cup of tea last night,
Mm.
and she was just so pumped about it that was completely her. She did the kettle whole thing, and she just wandered off, did it. I was watching back, and it's great. But she really has this big freedom cup that needs to be filled all the time,
Yeah.
and it's those decisions. Um,
And
I
don't
try
you
to
want
give,
to empower that? Like, that excites me that you've got a
yeah,
little female right there who wants ownership of a life. She doesn't want to be labeled fragile or weak,
yeah,
like so many of the messages that our girls get, that they are going to be liked more if they are not, too bossy,
yeah,
too strong.
yeah.
But being able to, right there, she needs that freedom, and empower that in
Yeah.
everyday expressions is pretty powerful.
Yeah, and I think that's a conflict I observe in her, is like, we've raised her to be, I joke about it saying, yes, the goal is to raise a strong, independent woman. You, I can't select the topics for my convenience. So if she said she doesn't want to do something and she doesn't want to do it, I equally have to respect that as much as, something that is more convenient. And I think
Totally.
it ties in beautifully with what you were saying about, and breaking down a bit, the ritual versus routine. For the people listening, like, if you frame up, routine is something based on the outcome, and you need to do it for the sake of the outcome. And a ritual is full of deeper meaning, and you're doing it for the experience in the moment. So maybe something to take away is assess your day with your children and look at the percentage of how much routine you have and how much ritual you have.
Love it. Love it. I mean, if we could do anything powerful for our kids, it would be spending 15, 20 minutes a day with them, just hanging and being with them in their world, in their space, loving what they're loving at that
Yeah,
moment. Like,
yeah,
wouldn't that be powerful for kids? And wouldn't
yeah,
they remember that in 10, 20 years' time, that someone actually really dug into and was connected to and got passionate about the thing that they really were into at that time? My dad did so well at this, Lucas. He just did. I was like, I don't know, maybe 9 or 10. I started my first business. It was a Lamington run. I don't know who negotiated to buy the wholesale Lamingtons from the bakery, but somehow we got 50 dozen Lamingtons every week. My dad drove that car with all the Lamingtons in the back, air conditioning on so they didn't melt in the heat of summer. And I just went door to door selling the Lamingtons on Friday afternoon until they were all gone. And he had such a way of empowering what I was into at the time. And it was everything from knitting jumpers to selling Lamingtons but he was right by my side. It was never, you can't do that because you're a girl. It was never, you better settle down. It was a bit like, how much money did you make this week, Michelle? He was
yeah.
fantastic.
Celebration.
Yeah, he was really good at drawing that out of me. And inside all of our kids, there is such uniqueness, whether it's just an interest, whatever it is, a skill, but whatever it is, if we honor that and teach our kids to honor that, I feel like that overrides all the tick boxes we've got going about resilience at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a simple breakdown of the Maslow's. If we support their basic needs and get up and then get them to the self-fulfillment.
That's
So
right.
they're the masters of what they need. What I observe with many families and families I work with through childcare and building playgrounds, because we do parent information nights, is that you do have the protection effect to a certain extent. They're too fragile, they're too delicate. And the protection, and that is just, I'm seeing that as one of the biggest causes of children's nerve. They're like quite nervous around because this perception that's getting put down on them that they're not capable.
Yeah.
Is that something you observe in your line of work as well?
Definitely with our girls. And
Yeah,
I hate seeing a teenage girl feel like she has to buck hard to shake that label that I'm supposed to be weak and fragile. I hate that
yeah,
because that's what really gets them into trouble, when they feel like they have to push hard against something that's been restraining them and they don't feel free to be themselves. I say to parents that we have nervous bystander energy. And I've had this as a mum. It's like when you're watching your child kick the winning goal in a soccer match, you have this knot in your stomach, hoping they're going to get that thing over the line because they know the consequences. The consequences. But as they go through life and they're applying for their first jobs, or they're going for big exams, or they're trying to change their friendship group, we have nervous bystander energy. And it's where we channel that energy that matters. I don't think we should have the expectation that we need to shut that down, because that's part of our connection and that innate feeling of protecting them. It's so important. But I have had to learn to channel that into productive places that are helpful for them. And I often remember times where I've asked my boys, what can I do to help you? And I remember my grade 12 boy said to me once, Mum, just don't talk quite so much. I don't want to talk about anything stressful after 9 o'clock at night. And, take your energy basically somewhere else. And if you could help me make my lunch, that'd be fantastic. And I think sometimes our energy, our nervousness comes on top of their maybe anxiety, on top of
yeah,
anxiety. It's kind of contagious. So we need to be mindful of that. We're either going to help them regulate their emotion, or we're going to add our emotion to the table with it.
yeah. And is that a technique you would use to find that balance between encouragement? And it's a technique I use with my children as well. It's like, yeah, you do have a problem. How are you going to solve it? I know you're so smart and good at solving problems. So what's your idea? And that's
Yeah.
So I try to put it back on them. But what point does that, like, what point do you step in? Because I'm constantly struggling with that one, going, I want to help so much and it's that protection thing, but I want you to be empowered. But then, like, if I don't step in at some stage to try to help with the problems they can't solve, I'm worried about the ongoing impact of that and saying, well, I can't rely on you.
Yeah. Okay. Two things here. Let's go this way and then this way.
Yeah.
I think if the risk is mild to moderate, man, let them go for it. And then be prepared to unpack it afterwards. And even if it has meant a few skinned knees or, broken hearts occasionally, I'm actually really glad that I've let my kids go into some environments that had an element of risk, because they need a full range of experiences to build strong resilience. They actually do. And so while the stakes are not so high, so why they don't have their own money and keys to a car, and we to a certain degree pick them up and scoop them up at the end of the day, it's a great time for them to experience a bit of risk. I think the line comes with safety, and because I have worked maybe on that pointy end of things in a bit of my career, I really see the need for in-charge energy and for parents to recognize those times where it's actually not their child's decision, and be able to walk into that space with the in-charge energy that says, and the only answer I'm going to accept right now is yes, mum. And there is times where I've said to my kids, I need that dishwasher unpacked. I need it unpacked now. And the only answer I want is yes, mum. So it's not a negotiation, and it's I don't need your opinion on everything. And I think as parents, we need to be able to define when our kids need in-charge energy, when they need our coaching and mentoring energy, where we're negotiating things, and when they need just our encouragement to say, yeah, go for it. And there are 3 different energies and spaces that we bring to parenting depending on what they need. I had a webinar with Nathan Wallace last week, neuroscientist, but we talked about calming, connecting, and then coaching our kids. And the work is really in calming and connecting. And that's the space that sometimes takes the time, the skill. We need to be able to validate their emotion really well. We need to be able to step into their shoes. We need to be able to see things through their window, as Karen Young says. That ability right there is far harder to master than to coach them or to help them problem solve. We know how to do that.
Yeah.
But it's the other stuff that sometimes is a bit hard work. And the more drained we feel as parents, the more it's harder to invest time and energy into that stuff, because we want to just like we're talking about, get to the next thing, get to the next outcome, when the real work, the real pain actually happens in that calming, connecting, regulating, so we can think clearer about life.
Yeah, and that really sounds like you've answered my question here of, like, what does a strong relationship between a parent and a child look like?
You're the backbone at the same time as the hugging arms.
Yeah.
And it's that ability to know where, and that can be really hard as they start to shift seasons and shift gears. I feel like as parents walk their kids through these stages of development, sometimes just say after the tween years, it's like they've climbed the pinnacle of that mountain and they're able to really enjoy the view for a minute, and it's beautiful and it's amazing, and they're celebrating how far their kids have come. But the next leg of the journey starts right down at ground zero again. And it's a hard climb again till they get to that moment where they're in those young adult years where you're standing next to them and you actually got this beautiful adult relationship where you can really treasure that season that has come to a close as well.
It's it's like loving freedom. If, like, you do have this innate reflex to love and protect, but it's like the love and let go is where you're going to teach them the skills. Something I talk a lot about in the early childhood sector is how childhood is under threat. The amount of screen time children get, the lack of freedom in one generation. In our generation, we had a kilometre of free play, and now it's down to line of sight. It's between 40 and 70 meters. But then delving into your work, teen years and those years of discoveries and failures and uncertainty, within yourself and that search for identity, that seems really equally under threat as a
Yeah.
younger childhood as well.
It absolutely does. And I think these days, because we are very well educated, but we're talking about really intense things like, pornography exposure and
Yeah.
pedophiles, and we've got so much on our mind as parents that we're making sure we're keeping our kids safe, and we have this heightened, I think, awareness of their safety, which is an excellent thing. That's not my point.
Yeah.
But growing up's meant to be fun, you know? And it's meant to sort of carry a lightness about it. And I feel like as parents, even with these conversations we're having with kids around, puberty and staying safe online, it's always got this undertone that's very intense. And we can never really enjoy the moment of where our kids are at in life if we're coming from it from such an adult perspective. It's almost sucking the life out of the everyday joy that our kids should be experiencing. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have that in-charge energy that sets boundaries and knows where the healthy line is for our kids. But gosh, we've got to keep a smile on our face, and we've got to keep it light.
Yeah. Do you have any suggestions and technique if the parents out there and they can do some reflection, go, yeah, I'm pretty intense actually.
I call it the mortgage frown, Lucas. It's the mortgage frown. It's just full on, isn't it?
You're like, yes, we're going to deal with these problems as teens, and even dialogue around that, like children with some challenging behaviors younger, and then this default, it really is a comment that just makes me, it's like, well, you just wait till they're a teenager.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
that. I was like, that's such a negative. You're setting yourself up there for some proper distance between you, us and them mentality. So what's some techniques we can get over the mortgage face?
Okay.
And be more of that teenage zone of being debt free.
Yeah. I always find that changing environments really helps me because my mind gets stuck in this adult loop, as I call it. And so being really deliberate and intentional about changing environments, like going for a walk with the dog with your child, if you're wanting to spend some quality time with them. Because sometimes in our own loop of environment, our mind is just going in the background like this, and it's not really shifting into their sphere. The other thing that used to really work for me when they were younger is letting them choose the activity, because it forced me to get the Nerf gun out, or to flick the lights off and run around and play hide and seek in the dark. It put me into the shoes of a child again. And I think as adults, we are not very good at playing unless we're forced to. And if you let them choose, it can really help. Be really aware of those transitions too, of when a child's bidding for your attention and you're needing to transition into giving them your full attention. How you do that is really important. So the quickest way for our kids to get our attention is often to pick a fight or act out. And we've got to recognize that that's often times where they're bidding for our attention, where they see our mortgage frown or they see us multitasking and they know they can't quite get all of our heart, and so they act up. The number one thing that kids tell me is they don't know how to get their parents' attention, or their parents don't listen. And we fall into this trap of multitasking, but realizing when we have that mental note, my kid's hanging around a little bit longer than usual, or they're acting out a little bit, we've got to see that as a bid for connection. And we've got to set up kind of the opportunity for us to transition out of our world and into their world.
Yeah. And that comes with that, using that framework, calm, connect, and then coaching. Calm connect is in the being realm, and that coaching is in the doing realm. And it's hard to switch. My wife calls it my work face. I can come in and, how's your day? Oh, it's been hard. Well, what you just need to do is this is it, fix. She's like, I don't need to fix anything. And we're constantly trying to fix our children.
Yeah, I know some families that play a game of cards together as a bit of a transition kind of period. So it just kind of gets everyone out of work mode into home mode. Food is an excellent breaker of routine as well. Like when we all sit down and have a meal together, I think that's something we tend to lose in our crazy schedules these days. And breakfast together, and even like that cup of Milo together or hot chocolate, that can actually be that moment where we're deliberately moving our headspace.
Yeah. And if a parent has just one habit to change to impact their relationship, because that's what it comes down to. It doesn't come down to trying to create a childhood experience or a teen or tween experience. It comes down to, okay, how do we foster a relationship? By the sounds of it. So what's the major go-to adjustment parents can make to strengthen those relationships?
Yeah. I think when relationships are tense or disconnected, it's normally because two people are not understanding or appreciating or valuing each other. And if we can just genuinely accept where our kids are at, there are some things that are only on the other side of the doorway of acceptance. So if you have a teenage girl who is just like, full on and acting out, you will always look back to her childhood unless you've walked through the doorway of acceptance for what's going on right now. And no matter if it's a toddler who's having a tantrum or, a tween who's really concerned about their body, being really present with our kids often is embracing and accepting where they're at right now without us seeing like it is wrong or bad or needing to be fixed.
Yeah.
And they can tell, because you don't want to spend time with someone you don't accept.
Yeah.
And if we can't be grateful for who our kids truly are, how are they going to be grateful for themselves?
Yeah. For me, my observation is that there seems to be a bigger and bigger void between where children are at and where we expect them to be.
Yeah.
That kind of has the impact of showing the child that they're not where they're meant to be. So it's instantly negative because you should be here. And like, what was it you said earlier about we're constantly wanting to have that progress?
Yeah, prepare them. I feel like kids who even they get into high school and they just feel like the biggest failures because they can't organize their books and they're not doing well in some of their assignments and they can't get a grasp on what this whole high school thing is. But what the sad thing is about that is it's their only expression or way to say, I'm coping really well. Like I'm a great human. And some kids just don't have a lot of other avenues where adults appreciate what they're bringing to the table. I hate seeing kids get lost in the system like that because they're often kids who are incredibly intelligent in other ways other than academics.
Yeah. And I'm working through that with my daughter being 7. She's very artistic and she told a teacher last week, I don't need to be good at reading and writing because I can talk through my art. And I was like, wow, you're a proper artist.
Put that on the wall.
Yeah.
The wisdom they come out with, isn't it?
Yeah. And how do you that system is there? It's an institution. You have to go through that. Mm-hmm. And how do you manage that? I want to keep her spark alive. I want to keep all children's spark alive. That's why creating play environments for all children is my passion, and I'm going to be doing it forever because I can meet at-risk children. I can meet all across the board. But how do we support the child to maintain their uniqueness, maintain their mastery into that system?
Okay. What I think our kids really lack is enough role models around their life, because let's face it, like building a tribe around our kids is the best way to be protective of their resilience as well, but enough role models around their life that see that potential, that see drawing as an expression of their soul, that can champion that. Now there's going to be some people who either don't like you in life or don't appreciate that unique blueprint. But if we can, that's why teachers are so powerful. Teachers who really see the unique blueprint. And it won't be every teacher, but environments for our kids where they can really have those older than them transition them into, this adult journey in a way that says, hey, you are okay just the way you are. And in fact, I actually honor and I admire who you are. The biggest challenge for kids, I think, is finding where who they are connects with the real world and adds value to the world. Because that's often where they get paid. That's where their living comes from, is when who they are connects with a need in the world. And so this balance of being able to give kids a role models to usher them up, but a sense of giving to the world around them is a really beautiful combination to help them find their place in the world.
Yeah. And is the lack of identity around self the main cause of a lot of this turmoil
I
for
think so.
tweens and teens?
Look, I'm writing about this at the moment, and I can't tell you, Lucas, how passionate I am about this, because I think genetically our kids have a flow, and the more we can help them go with that flow and not against that flow, the more very clear messages we're sending to them that they have something really valuable to the world inside of them. And it's inside of them, not on a tick box or a chart
Yeah.
box. And that just excites me so much. That unique blueprint, it's often got a lot to do with their genetic drives as well. So it's not something that we can get in and fix and change and manipulate.
Yeah.
We're giving them opportunities, and we're giving them experiences they need to really feel like that part of them is being fulfilled.
Yeah. I think a point to make is that we're not telling parents to, keep everything fluffy and keep everything perfect, because that's going to be just as detrimental.
Absolutely. I've got an arty kid too, Lucas, and he's 20, with a film business. But watching his journey, he just doesn't fit into a lot of the boxes. I've got an eldest who went from high school to uni. He's just finished studying engineering. It's a very clear path. And then you have some other kids who don't quite fit in the box for whatever reason. And their path is a lot bumpier and windier and a little bit rocky, and that nervous bystander energy we get, and we go, well, how are you going to provide for a family, and how is this going to work? And you can see our adult mortgage frowns coming into place when we really need to be able to go, what's the next best step, and help them unpack. And I often say to Maddie, like, what's the next best step, buddy? And it's inside of them. What's the next best step actually roars pretty loudly if we can quieten everything else.
Yeah. And how else, that's a great technique to use. Is that something that offsets the nervous bystander? Or do you have other techniques to offset your nervous bystander reflex?
I
I
think
love
with
that
the nervous
phrase.
bystander, what the important thing is know where it's channeling you. If it's channeling you to tap on their door at 9 o'clock at night and have a deep conversation, if you're more needy than they are in areas, it's self-awareness, I think, with that nervous bystander energy. And I find looking after myself and saying, what can I control, actually makes me channel that energy back inwards, which makes me a stronger person for them at the end of the day, because we can project that instead of taking responsibility for that. So I think with that one, it's so much about awareness and where it's manifesting. And when it triggers our kids into frustration with us or anger, it's normally because our nervous bystander energy is getting into their space of what they should be taking responsibility for. And we're getting too close to what they really need to, and they're pushing us this way, especially as teenagers, to get out.
Yeah, I really love that. It sums up so well, that nervous bystander energy, because it can push and pull.
It can. And it's not wrong. I hate this helicopter parent thing. Like, I just get politically incorrect. But I tell you what, we damn love our kids,
100%.
and we're doing the best with what we've got, and sometimes our own fears or experiences as a child, especially around friendships. I find this, parents who've had really bad friendships in primary school, they're often very protective of their kids because they know the impact it's had on them, and they know how detrimental social relationships are, with regards to how kids feel about themselves. And so when I feel like a parent is maybe nervous bystander energying / helicopter parenting, getting in kids' worlds, it's often about pausing, breathing, being self-aware in that moment, and then putting the ownership back to our child and realizing it's their life, it's their unique journey, and I'm going to help facilitate that, and trusting, this word trusting, instead of fear and control, trusting that inside of our kids is the next best step. They often don't have the next best step for 5 or 10 years' time. But right in that moment, they often can put the next foot forward in a really constructive way. And that will lead to the next and the next and the next. And why it's the next best step for them is because it's a step that they need to take, even if it means more learning. And it's the step that they owned, because we can't impose self-regulation on kids and expect it to work for them. What it is about self-regulation that works is because we've chosen it, not because someone's told us how to care for ourselves in that moment. It's our will and our choice activating that's so powerful.
Yeah, and as you started to speak, my notes were awareness and then wisdom, like being self-aware, and then you can put the wisdom out there. Yeah. But you can't just force knowledge into someone. And you've got the wisdom because you've gone through the experience for yourself and you've cultivated that wisdom. We do skip the wisdom train if we're reacting instead of responding. And that's where we
often wait in the wings with all their wisdom on their backpack, don't we? And we wait in the wings for these precious, priceless moments where we're really connected and our kids' hearts are open and they can hear our voice almost in unison with their own voice.
Yeah.
And it enables that next best step to be just reinforced.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I teach with educators and parents around even just playing and the language we use and getting over the react respond is just take the pause and don't give them the information they need to make an informed decision for themselves.
Yeah.
So they're climbing a tree. They know they can fall.
Yeah.
They know they need to be aware and cautious. But that the information that could cause an injury would be if there's a branch. Mm-hmm. And so those things we don't see. And I'm talking things in a very physical realm.
Yeah.
But when around risk, but it transcends. Like one of the riskiest things a girl could do is go up and try to join in that other social circle that she's not used to. So is it a matter of giving them the information, or is it a matter of, from a social standpoint, is it a matter of giving them the information for their learning, the hazards they might not see? Or is it just going, all right, there might be some harsh learnings here.
Yeah. Now, my field is with tweens and teens, okay?
Yes.
So puts a really different filter on that because you prepare teenagers for risky environments. You know, if you know they're going to a party where there's potential risk, you go through all of those things.
Yeah.
They have, you know, it's our job to give them drug and alcohol education and talk through consent and all that stuff. But we've got to realize when they're in really high pressure social environments that their peers' opinion of them in that moment often counts far more than our education, and that information just goes out the window. So they're so highly influenced by peers at that stage. And, you know, an example of this is talking to a boy who's who's in emergency because he's flipped off a fence in front of his peers. Now, in the moment, that seemed like a really cool thing to do. But later, retrospectively, he can actually say, oh, that was a bit dumb, wasn't it? Now, it's not that he didn't know he couldn't hurt himself. It's just there was factors that overrode that at the time. And so I guess when we're talking about, we come back to this, is it a safety thing?
Yeah.
Is the environment too unsafe to trust? And I used to, as a youth worker, say you never trust a teenager. Now, I don't know if I'd say it like that these days, but as this raw youth worker, I'm like, because they get into environments where there's other factors that come into play that they actually don't have the ability to manage at that stage in their development. And so what we're trusting is that they can do their homework and maybe turn up to their part-time job on time, but we're not trusting them with life-changing decisions. You know, I've said, even mums have told me, you know, I trusted her to sleep in the same room as a boyfriend and not have sex because we talked about all of that and we've done all the education, and I didn't think she was going to go to that party and do that because I trusted her. And I'm like, well, we can misplace that trust into areas that they're developmentally not ready to handle so easily. So I feel like that is a big line with it. It's, are they developmentally ready to handle that? What's the risk? If it's mild to moderate, look, we all need a few stories as we grow up.
Mm.
But if it's, moderate to high, we might need that in charge energy that comes in and says, hey, I'm going to just stand up and be the big person here because we want to get you through to the other place of this safely.
Yeah, and it's quite the tricky avenue as a parent. Do you be the one that is reflecting on my wife's growing up, and I'm one of 6 boys, she's one of 2 girls, very different experience. But you've got the type of parents that are like, all right, go to the party, you're going to do your thing. Or then you've got the other parent that is like, you're not going. Like, and then the rebellion that comes with that, the push away, the dividing of the relationship. So how do we find that middle road between not do what you want or...
And some parents have a higher tolerance for risk than others.
Yeah.
And I guess in my work, I've really seen that diversity, even with technology. Some parents just don't have quite the fear around that, and they have much looser boundaries around that. So this has got to be a personal journey, but you've got to know your why, parents. Digging into the why and knowing your values as a family can really help. I think we can be too rigid with kids. I have seen a lot of parents not embrace teenage things, high risk teenage things, because they feel like, they're being a bad example to their kids. Even like an example of that is music. Being able to enjoy some teenage things and realize they're not going to stick or last forever, but what you're doing is creating shared memories. There's value in that. Keep a big picture. I think sometimes we zoom in when we really need to be zooming out.
Not getting caught up in the detail, like of the moment. So, well, this isn't happening now. I'm going, well, in the scheme of things.
And it's that beautiful thing you said before, Lucas, it's whole being, their whole being,
Yeah.
not just this one little area. We can
Yeah.
zoom in on this one area that they're not coping very well with instead of zooming out and appreciating the bigger picture that's around them.
If you could, like, you've seen the current experience of teens that's happening now, from social media to social challenges, alcohol, drugs, the whole bit, and all the challenges they face. You can create the utopic experience for children for their well-being, resilience. What would those ingredients look like?
Oh, the utopic experience for children. It would be to change up our education system a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, to make that more holistic,
Yeah.
because this takes up 6, 8 hours of their day.
Mm.
I think that would be a massive thing.
Yeah.
A safe place for kids.
100%. Like, and that's what this has really made me reflect on this conversation, and your work in general really made me look at, well, if we are supporting this, why are we subjecting them to environments that completely are against it?
I wonder if what you're trying to get at, if I could change anything, it wouldn't actually be to change the kids. It would be to change the systems and the stress of the adults that are taking care of them. I don't think the problem's with our kids at all.
Exactly.
I think it's actually looking at ourselves and the systems that we're a part of and saying to ourselves, how can we just do this a little bit better or a little bit differently?
Kind of get off the treadmill of the norm and just go, okay, does this child even like running on the treadmill? Maybe not.
Yeah. It's like telling a kid with ADD that they've got to run around the oval a few times because it's going to help them. And the kid's like, it doesn't help me. It just really annoys me and embarrasses me.
Yeah.
It's that type of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And I can relate, because that's exactly my experience at school when I got diagnosed with ADD in year 5.
Yeah.
Like, go run first. I was like, thanks for singling me out.
And that's not actually really helpful right now. But this all takes time. So I guess we acknowledge that there's so much happening change-wise in so many areas, and we're advocating for better things, but it all takes time. So it's the nitty-gritty daily things we're doing in our home to honor who our kids are and to call them into that purpose and to help them see where it connects and fits with the world. And sometimes that's as simple as little conversations. It's as simple as giving them opportunities at the right moments in their lives. it's as simple as listening to them, and really leaning into what their next best step in life is.
Yeah. What are those things? Because if you've got an agenda, your children smell it like a shark smells blood in the water. And they get their eyes literally do the rollback thing as well and just be like, yeah, good one.
My mum
How,
always used to make afternoon tea when she wanted to talk to me about something. Like it was just like I knew afternoon tea was that kind of moment where it was just these trigger things. I think we've got to be really respectful of our kids and make our intentions clear as
yeah,
well. Sometimes they're avoiding us because they're just afraid of, maybe boys are afraid of mums getting into that space too much or not being heard or understood or using
yeah,
too many words and them getting flooded emotionally. So it's
yeah,
us being very aware of where they're at. And let's face it, a lot of these things are biological drivers. They're developmentally normal. We're expecting kids to behave in a way that's adult-like when they are what, children, tweens, teens, and they're in very different stages of development.
yeah. And we've spoken a lot about such a broad range of the experience today. If a parent's listen to this or educator and they're thinking, okay, well, how do I create more well-being for the children within our relationships and that bit more secure attachment, if you will? Um, what does that look like?
Okay, what's some things that we've covered that are really valuable? I guess it's ownership of ourselves first,
Mm,
recognizing when that nervous bystander energy is putting us into the space of our kids.
yeah,
Um, the second thing is just time with kids, not preparing them for anything, but appreciating where they're at. And that has to help them foster a value and appreciation for themselves as a unique human being. And I think one of the things we also covered is this ability to give kids ownership and choice and power in their real world at that time, and how important that is for our kids to experience what that feels like, to experience what it's like to make a decision for myself, to know what it's like to be the boss of the family for a day, to have those
yeah,
experiences have got to be really helpful in their journey of things. I think
yeah,
purpose and responsibility just are huge in kids' lives, and to be able to foster that and help that come from inside of their heart as at a young age can only really help them find that really clear direction and where they as a person fit in the world.
yeah. That's our big notes at the top of my pages here. Decision making Friday.
Yeah.
There was recently a movie that came out and it was Yes Day. So everything that the children decide, the parents have to say yes. Maybe a more tame back version of that is Decision Making Friday.
Definitely. Do you know 27 out of 40 kids, girls, and 25 boys feel like they are resilient? So, as much as we kind of look on and we see them flounder and we get really concerned about it, and they've been called a generation with a life skills deficit, with so
Yeah,
much information, yet such a deficit in just real life application of things, in amongst all that, our kids on the whole, over half of our kids, 27%, they feel like they've got a handle on this thing. I think we
that's
need to believe in them more.
that is good because they don't know any different.
No.
They're not comparing themselves to,
And they're comfortable in
attrition.
their journey. And like we talked about, technology is like an extension of who they are as a human being. So they don't see it the way we see it. It's a
Yeah,
very, very different generation with regards to, where they see the deficits and what they think they need going
yeah.
forward.
They're not fractured. They're not broken.
No.
Do we need to just come from a place of like, they're going to be fine?
Well, it needs to be managed,
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not
like
saying, oh, there you go. There's the keys to the car, credit card, off you go.
so it's this balance, isn't it? Like we
Yeah,
talked about
yeah,
of in charge energy and this coaching and this
yeah,
empowering
yeah,
and knowing when to bring both in place. And I think both is valid. And I think we need to kind of walk the journey of our kids looking to us and knowing that we've got it.
Yep.
You know, that we really are leaders of this ship, and that we are, you know, their parent that's strong and capable, and no matter what you throw at me, I'm going to be able to handle it. But in the same time, giving enough room, not too loose, not too tight.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't be an extremist. If you could sum up a message, an important message that you want parents to know,
Yeah.
what's that?
Okay. Keep celebrating the right things when it comes to kids. Realize that there's a lot of things we celebrate that they actually didn't achieve, do, or invest into at all, like how pretty their dress is, you know.
Yeah.
Make sure we're celebrating the things that they have put effort into and care about. I think another message that I feel like is really important when it comes to resilience is that boundaries still matter. Is that our in charge energy, and that word no is actually still really valid, because if the adults in life are constantly moving to accommodate kids, then they never have to butt up against anything that's going to stay stable. And what happens when kids have to butt up against a no that's not going to move is they have to adapt and change, which is actually a really healthy thing for them to learn.
Yep.
And I'm sad to see 20-year-olds get into the workplace and have fights with their bosses, because it's the first time they've really experienced something that is not going to shift for them, and they're having to shift and move and change. And I think the next thing is just keep bringing the calm into your life, into the life of your kids, because it's from that place of calm and connection that we really have the opportunity to coach them forward.
Yeah, that's beautiful and functional and practical. And that pretty much sums you up in your mission. So beautiful intention, it's practical, and then it's executional as well. But thank you so much. I think we've had a great conversation today about these bigger view of things, and trying to understand that. And I'd love to have you back on to like talk about more specific things that parents can do.
We've had such a great general conversation. We went everywhere. We've just gone around the world and back with just some. I hope parents find it just encouraging more than anything.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
there's no kind of right and wrong way of all this. I've seen some amazingly strict parents have incredible relationships with their kids, and then I've seen some parents that would be termed quite lenient, and their kids have been amazing as well. And I think it all comes down to this ability to connect, to transfer your why, and to just do your damn best every single day to take responsibility for ourselves and nurture our kids in a way that they can take responsibility for themselves.
Yeah, sums up. It's awareness, isn't it? It's awareness of yourself and who you are, and it's awareness of that child. You know, the strict parents were like, well, we're going to need some strict guidelines for this child to thrive, and equally for the child that needs a bit more lenience.
Oh, sometimes I've seen strict families and I've said to myself, how do they get away with that? Like, you know, no technology till you're actually 13, you know, like, and they pull it off. And you know why they pull it off? Because they're so invested and they're spending so much time connecting. It's an anchoring for the extremities of some of those rules. And it works because it really, if kids are feeling safe, if they're feeling connected, I think we can be too tight sometimes because our kids need that broad range of experiences. But I'm amazed at how much parents can pull off when they're well connected with their kids.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for not only the value you've offered our listeners for this conversation, but also how much you've contributed to me as a father and supporting my kids as well. And I look forward to chatting again around more of those specifics when I want to delve into like how do we support our wider community and other families as well. Yeah. So we don't feel alone.
Those role models. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. It's an absolute honor and pleasure to have chatted to you today.
Thanks, Lucas. You're amazing. Your work's brilliant, and you can hear your passion for it in every word that you say, which is exciting.
Thank you so much.